Chapter 8. It took him 2 days of walking to cross the mountains, and he found a pathway through the region leading him to the cliffs from which he could see the ocean. He had accepted the hum and visions of the emanations as he gazed upon the water. He knew that what he could see and hear was different, perhaps beyond what others could sense. His eyelids dropped halfway, and he heard footsteps to his right. Turning his head, he noticed a little boy not older than 10 or 11 approaching. The emanations played with his ability to see colors, and the youth's skin appeared to be blue. Without any strange mannerisms that one might expect to be present in a boy with blue skin, the kid walked up to Stefan. "Is it you?" he asked. "Me, you, or I. They call me Stefan." The little boy smiled. "Aren't you a little young to be here alone?" "Oh, I'm not alone," he gestured over his shoulder. "My father is watching." Stefan looked in the direction the child had pointed and saw a thin man with a long beard sitting on a flat rock about 10 meters away. He silently sat and stared unblinking out to the ocean. Stefan raised a hand and waved, and the man nodded slightly in return. Stefan continued looking at the old man while asking the child, "Where is your mother?" The child laughed innocently and smacked his lips with a smile. "He's the one I come from," he said, pointing to his father. Stefan looked at the child and was not amused by the laughter or cryptic message. He looked back out over the water and could sense the child's smile fade. With an impatient nervousness, the boy stepped closer. "Are you too?" he asked. Stefan looked at him. "Am I to what?" The child stepped back and thought for a moment while keeping eye contact with Stefan. Nodding while squinting his eyes, the boy smiled. "I know what to do." The child ran towards his father and retrieved a small drum from behind the stoic, observing figure. The child ran back beside Stefan, who allowed his ruptured human vision to gaze upon the water and sky. The boy sat on the ground with the drum between his knees and began tapping. At first, there was no recognizable rhythm. But then the child's fingers touched the drum with a precision unlikely to be present in a boy of his age. The drum coerced air molecules into specific patterns over time, and the rhythm was present. Stefan noticed that the drum hits were in line with certain portions of the humming he could hear, and he began to understand that the boy could hear the emanations as well. The pitch of the ethereal sound shifted in relation to the rhythm pressed into reality. The boy continued playing, and the music between he and the beyond was clear. And Stefan was surprised as his body reacted. His right foot began alternating weight on heel and toe, and his hips began to sway. He felt a sense of peace wash over him, and felt his arms begin to move without his commanding them. He slowly blinked, and when his eyes opened, he could see the deep violet tendrils rising from his appendages and stretching upward and outward away from him. He felt no fear, but experienced a curiosity as his body began to dance. He felt lightheaded and could sense only the strange music. He noticed flashes of lightning over the water and a heaving red glow within the gathering clouds. A circle was forming, and he could see that it was a circle of fire. Giving over his care for what he could sense, he floated above and could see his body gyrating and moving with a stunning beauty and grace. He turned upwards to the sky and found the stars of the universe pulsating with the child's rhythm. His mind was not bound to his senses, and he coasted through the world, finding the figure of Nicky Bianco Randis standing in the room where he had last seen her, wearing loose-fitting jogging pants and a sweatshirt. She stood before an easel and painted a picture of the Red Rock Formation outside of her window. Her brush stopped moving, and she looked to the sky. Seeing the gathering storm and lightning, her breath was even, and she turned in her chair, looking in what would have been Stefan's eyes if his body was in the room with her. "And so you are," she said. "But I am not ungrateful for my time." And she turned back to her painting, recreating the contours of the rock with the pungent reddish-brown paint. Time, he thought, and his perspective expanded beyond the bounds of time. He could see a room with a bed and small desk, 2 chairs and a television. It was a hotel room, and he could see the occupants of the room. It was Clara, younger than he had known her, and he was aware that she was 19. There was a man with her, older than her, and he knew the man was 31. The open bottle of wine on the small desk with 2 plastic cups stained red, and the nearly naked couple on top of the blankets grinding against each other. The man began to pull off her panties, and she grabbed them, saying no. He complained that she said no while still grinding against him. She said that she was a virgin. The man brought his hand to his briefs and moved them aside, and then slid hers to one side. He thrust forward, and she cried out in pain. He froze and retracted while saying, "There, now you're not a virgin anymore." She pushed him off her amidst his protests and rolled to her side, holding her shoulders. He touched her, and she flinched. Frustrated, he stood up and with a torrent of verbal outrage put on his clothes. As he pulled his shirt over his head, Stefan heard his own voice call the man what he was. "What did you call me?" the man said to Clara. "I didn't say anything," she replied. "I thought you called me a rapist," he said, a mixture of fear and anger in his voice. "No," she said, I didn't say anything." The man put his coat on. "Good," he said. "Let's keep it that way." He walked out of the hotel room. Clara, laying on the bed, began crying. Stefan's visage followed the man, but out of the door was a tumult of events and elements. "I need to know where he is now," Stefan heard himself say. The chaotic world formed into a clear picture. A large crowd before a stage, the outdoor concert, a comedy event, was bombarded by fierce winds that rocked and tore apart the scaffolding holding the lights and sound system. A lightning strike destroyed one of the generators, and the ignited gasoline spewed into the crowd, and Stefan saw him. He watched the liquid fire splash upon the man's skin and heard him shriek in agony. Others in the crowd around him dropped, and Stefan swarmed about his body. The man's body was scorched, and his circulatory system was shutting down. "No, you don't," Stefan said, and infused the attributes of the world with his strength, forcing them around and into the man's body, pumping life into the pained and horribly wretched figure of a man. "You don't get to die yet." His flesh blistering and curling into charred cinders, the man was conscious and aware of this terrible pain. He could feel as his blood boiled and seared his muscles. He knew that his organs were melting together, but he was refused death as a refuge from such pain. "You know the pain you've inflicted," Stefan told him, watching the man's eyes in search of the voice he could hear. "Say what you are," Stefan commanded. The man's eyes began bubbling as the tears were evaporating, his skin now scathed away to bone in some places. He said. "Say what you are," Stefan commanded. With the liquid chemicals in his brain turning to steam and the tissue inside of his skull drying out and shrinking so that his faculties were all but gone except the pain of his body burning away into nothing, he faded while somehow forming the word rapist. And Stefan let him go. The man died, and Stefan felt a wave of vindication, realizing he was suddenly standing beside Clara. Clara, not registering his presence, looked out a large picture window from the 20th floor of a building. She and others looked out to the storm clouds, the debris thrown by the winds, and the fiery red lightning. She was scared, but emanated a satisfaction that her rapist had suffered a most terrible and painful death. She did not know how she knew this, but she knew it all the same, and the emanations told such to Stefan. Stefan, in that moment, realized that this was real, that the destruction and the powerful storm was present in the world, and he immediately turned his perspective back to his body. But his body was busy. The dance held the same music, yet his body moved with a fast fluidity. His arms moved so fast it looked like he had more than two, and his legs rounded on his hips in superhuman motions and with a smoothness that was impossible by his standards. He tried to enter his body, but the tendrils of energy were too fast and numerous and pushed him back. While attempting to get through the wriggling strands of light, he heard something beyond the music. "We are, we become, and we destroy," the thunderous deep voice said. "We are, you destroy," Stefan said. "We destroy," the voice said, and a tendril of energy struck Stefan's ethereal self. Stefan was given a flashing view of the man's burning body with a cloud of purple and red smoke keeping him alive, and Stefan knew he was watching the moment of vengeance he had with the man who hurt Clara. His vision flashed, and he watched his own body dancing destructive forces into existence while wearing a face of pure dispassion. "He deserved that," Stefan called out. "Not everyone deserves destruction." We are, the voice growled. Stefan looked at his body, orchestrating emanations throughout the world to burn away and lay waste to all material that encases the energies. We become, the voice boomed, and Stefan forced his being to imagine Clara bravely watching the doom of all things lurch towards her. He created the feeling of his lips against her cheek and felt the calm hope radiate from her. He saw her and saw her lift her hand to her cheek as though she was savoring the tactile sensation of his kiss. And he decided, he may only be human, and this other part of we that destroys may be beyond human, but it still needed his body to catalyze the destruction. And we destroy, the voice and Stefan said in unison. Stefan locked his being onto a tendril of swirling energy and directed it outward into the reaches of space. Traversing time, he located the material he needed, an ancient stone in a distant area of the universe. He prodded and pulled, rolled and rubbed the rock and sent it on a million-year course of movement to a specific point in space and time, leading it along the deep violet energy of the tendril to which he held. The meteor picked up speed through space and careened through the atmosphere of Earth. The mighty asteroid was worn down by the friction and burned smaller and smaller while being pulled in by gravity. It coasted over the North American continent, leaving a trail of ash and smoke. The fireball glowed larger as a huge chunk evaporated into gas. What remained was a glowing mixture of iron and a metal alien to the Earth until this moment, when the soccer ball-sized projectile crashed into Stefan's body, decimating most of the cliff on which he danced and throwing his mangled body into the ocean. The child sat silently with the drum, peering over the edge of the cliff. He looked up to the sky and watched the circle of fire spin and dissipate in the sky behind dark clouds that vanished in the seconds that followed. The wind calmed. The few distant strikes of lightning struck the ocean and illuminated the water across the horizon. The boy stood up and ran to his father. "I told you," he said. "I told you it would be worth it." His father, neither smiling nor frowning, shifted his eyes from the vision of the ocean and sky to the child. They said not a word. The child gestured all around him with both arms. "It all just looks better from here."